Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Schwartz with Berkeley Lab. Welcome to the second of 5 webinars this year on the Distributed Energy Resource Interconnection Roadmap, published by the U.S. Department of Energy's Interconnection Innovation e-Exchange. The roadmap identifies a wide range of solutions to address challenges for interconnecting energy resources to both distribution and sub-transmission grids. Funded by DOE's Solar and Wind Technologies offices, the I2X initiative fosters open dialogue among diverse stakeholders on interconnection challenges, bridges knowledge gaps, and supports practical solutions. Berkeley Lab advances solutions identified in the roadmap. In addition to this webinar series, we're conducting several studies on interconnection timelines and costs, automation of interconnection processes, allocation of interconnection costs, and using innovative technologies to evolve interconnection procedures. We're also developing a publicly available web portal with DER interconnection queue data across the United States and providing training and technical assistance for state agencies. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is on increasing data access, transparency, and security. First, we'll hear from Adam Podpora with New York Central Hudson Gas and Electric. Then we'll hear 2 state perspectives, Cody Matthews from Michigan Public Service Commission, and David Rearden and Calvin Monson with the Illinois Commerce Commission. Catherine Chelminsky with Berkeley Lab will kick off Q&A with panelists, and then we'll get to your questions and comments. We have 2 hours, so we have plenty of time for discussion. Next slide. So first, some housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded. Slides for today's presentation are posted. We'll put the link in the chat box, and a recording will be posted there soon. Please enter your questions for panelists at any time in the Q&A box. We'll take clarifying questions after each presentation, but hold all other questions until all presentations are done. Feel free to use the chat box to make comments at any time. And finally, if you want to ask a question or make a comment live, that is great. Go to reactions, select the raise hand feature, and we'll call on you by name and unmute you to speak. Catherine?
Thanks, Lisa. The DOE I2X DER Interconnection Roadmap provides a guide of actions to take over the next 5 to 10 years to implement solutions designed to address DER interconnection challenges. The focus of this webinar is increasing data access, transparency, and security. Solutions outlined by the roadmap to improve process and data access and transparency include establishing guidelines for collecting and sharing grid data, expanding and standardizing reporting of interconnection data, establishing and maintaining frequently updated hosting capacity analysis tools. To learn more about I2X events and resources, you can scan the QR code in the slide here or use the link, which we will share in the chat box. Our webinar series continues with a set of topics covering economic efficiency in our 3rd and 4th webinars, including a focus on coordination between interconnection and grid planning in our 3rd webinar. And we're planning to hold this webinar in July or August time period, followed by a second part focusing on cost sharing for our 4th webinar. And we're planning to hold this webinar in the September-October timeframe. Lastly, our 5th and final webinar in this series will focus on maintaining a reliable, resilient, and secure grid. And this is planned for November-December later this year. Please sign up for the I2X Connect to stay up to date on the dates and details for these upcoming webinars, and you can scan again the QR code on this slide. All right, and now we will open up to our panelists. I will stop sharing and turn over first to Adam Panelists, Section Engineer for Distribution Planning and Interconnection at New York Central Hudson Gas and Electric. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. My name is Adam Podpora. I am the section engineer for Central Hudson's Electric Distribution Planning and Interconnections Department. Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me to this webinar on increasing data access, transparency, and security. I'm going to give the New York State utility perspective on this topic related to interconnection data. So quick agenda for my presentation today. I'll cover an introduction of Central Hudson and our interconnection statistics. Then I'll cover the New York State Standardized Interconnection Requirements, the SIR document. I'll then go into DG reporting, distributed generation reporting in New York State, followed by hosting capacity across New York State, and finally, our system data portal. Central Hudson. We are a regulated transmission and distribution utility. We are located in southeast part of New York State, along the Hudson River. We are south of Albany, north of New York City, nestled between some of our other utilities like Con Edison in New York City. We have NYSEG to our east and west. We have National Grid to the north. We have approximately 1,300 employees at Central Hudson. We are a Fortis Inc. subsidiary. Fortis is a Canadian company, our parent company. We have approximately 90,000 natural gas customers and 315,000 electric customers. And as I said, we are a transmission and distribution company. So we have about 80 substations throughout our service territory and a mix of overhead and underground facilities for electric distribution. And we have three small urban secondary networks in the cities of Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, and Kingston. Otherwise, most of the territory is suburban, rural, mix of residential and commercial industrial loads. Distributed generation at Central Hudson. So on the left side of my graph, you see three different interconnection processes. We have the New York State SIR, the Standardized Interconnection Requirements. That is for all distribution interconnections under 5 megawatts. Below that, we have the utility process. That is for 5 to 20 megawatt interconnections onto a distribution substation bus. And finally, we have the NYSO process. That is for transmission interconnections within New York State. And as we move along through the chart here, you can see that for interconnections, we have almost 18,000 interconnected projects totaling 352 megawatts through the New York State SIR process. We have not interconnected any projects in the utility or NYSO processes onto our system. In Q, that's where we have our utility and NYSO projects. You can see through the SIR process, we have about 200 megawatts in Q. Through the utility process, 49 megawatts, and through the NYSO process, staggering 3,000 megawatts of DG in Q. Those are connections onto the transmission system. A significant portion of that is energy storage. Note the ratio of the generation compared to our system summer peak on the right side of the page there. So you can see in 2024, we had a system peak just over 1,100 megawatts. So even our interconnected value of 350 megawatts is a decent ratio compared to our summer peak. But the staggering figure is the NYSO Q number of 3,000 megawatts compared to that system peak. How many of these projects will actually interconnect? That's yet to be seen, but they are working through the interconnection process. So today I'm going to be focusing on the New York State Standardized Interconnection Requirements, the SIR. Again, this is the process defined in New York State for all interconnections less than 5 megawatts onto the distribution system. The New York State SIR is the governing document for developers, utilities, and the state to follow when it comes to distributed generation interconnections. So it is nice that everyone knows what the rules are in the state. So when developers work across different utilities, we are all governed by the same document. I attempted to highlight the two processes that are most common within the SIR. So less than 50 kW interconnection process you see here in green. This is for your rooftop residential systems. Obviously, that's going to be the vast volume of the projects we receive, review, and interconnect. This is a pretty streamlined process where the developer, the customer submits the application. Central Hudson performs a quick review to make sure there are no constraints or limits at the POI. We then grant the developer or customer approval for construction. They construct the DG, apply for final interconnection. Central Hudson will review the smart inverter settings, make sure that they match our Central Hudson setting profile, and then grant them final interconnection or permission to operate. The New York State SIR does require that all projects 50 kW and larger must go through a preliminary technical study after they apply. So the application is deemed complete, and then a technical study is performed to, at a high level, see how the DG will impact the distribution circuit. If it's a project within the 50 kW to roughly, let's say, 100 or 200 kW range, a preliminary study may be all that's required before granting approval to construct. The larger projects, up to 5 megawatts, will require a more in-depth impact study within the SIR. This detailed impact study is known as the CSER, and that may take up to 60 business days, but that's when engineering teams at each utility really look into how that large DG project is going to impact the distribution circuit and the substation. Once that study is completed, a cost estimate with system upgrades is given to the developer, and they can elect to remain in queue or withdraw. So through the New York State SIR, utilities are required to publish these monthly inventory reports. The reports first, Central Hudson's earliest version of this report is back from 2003. And back then, the report was filed on an annual basis and only included interconnected projects. In 2012, the report was changed to quarterly filings and followed by monthly filings in 2015. Throughout that time, the report matured and additional fields were added to the report, such as including in queue projects and even withdrawn projects. Over time, we've also been asked to include, more fields related to how the utilities perform at each timeline and milestone, and also show the cost estimates for system upgrades. And I'll go over each of the fields in the monthly inventory report over this slide and the next one. So if we look at the top section here, the first part of this inventory report covers the administrative and locational data for your interconnection. So, we show the developer, the CH project number, the town, the county, the zip code, the circuit ID, and the substation that this project will be interconnecting to. Note that this is for every project through the SIR, so this is your residential up to 5 megawatt sites. The second group of fields here, bottom of the screen, your system type information. So the report shows the size of the system in kWAC. The vast majority of projects on our system are solar PV. We do have a number of hybrid PV plus energy storage projects on the system as well, and a few standalone energy storage, as well as some of the other technologies you see listed there. To the bottom right, you see that we list the metering type. So is this system going to be net metered? Is it going to be remote net metered, remote credit, or community distributed generation, CDG? We also show the protective equipment, where we list the main inverter type that's going to be utilized for this interconnecting project. On to the next page, at the top here, we show the application and study timelines. So per the SIR, today's standard, when an application is received, the utility has 10 business days to review that application for completeness, provide any feedback, and either accept the application or return it to the developer to make edits to whatever documentation is missing or incorrect. As I mentioned before, if the system is 50 kW or larger, the system will have to go into a preliminary technical study or technical review, and that preliminary review is 15 business days. So the utility has 15 business days to complete a set of high-level screens and then return the results to the developer and let them know that they can either interconnect or they need additional study. If they need additional study, they will go into the Caesar, which is 60 business days and up to 100 business days if the utility and developer can agree that an additional 40 business days is needed for any kind of unique occurrences that might come up during the study. If we go to the bottom half of the page now, this is where we get into some of the different costs. So the first section is the cost of that interconnection study that the developer pays the utility to perform the study. At the end of the Caesar study, the utility includes in the report the dollar amount that the system upgrades will cost to interconnect onto the Central Hudson distribution system. So we provide the estimated cost and the actual cost of that interconnection after reconciliation. We track when the payments are made by the developer towards those system upgrades, and the construction start date is set by that date of the final payment. So once the developer pays 100%, construction begins, and then it's a matter of the utility and the developer coordinating to get the system constructed, tested, and interconnected. Per the SIR, once the Caesar report is delivered to the developer, they have 90 business days to pay 25% of the system upgrades. And then after they pay 25%, they have another 120 business days to pay the remaining 75%. Hosting capacity maps. Here's another means of how Central Hudson and the New York joint utilities share data with our developers and industry within the state. So we have 3 hosting capacity maps available: solar PV, energy storage, and electrification. These have also gone through multiple versions and development over the past approximately, I think it's 6 to 8 years for solar PV, where these maps, when they were first published, were simply providing some high-level feeder level data. But now for solar PV and energy storage, we provide nodal data. So a developer can enter their address and receive a approximate hosting capacity value at that address, at that specific node on the system. The electrification map, that was formerly known as the electric vehicle or EV map. This map is still just at the feeder level and gives developers an idea of the capacity on a feeder for load serving capability. This map was required by the state to be turned into the electrification map and some value added. The request was made in 2023, and this map was published in January 2024. The added feature that was requested was for there to be a summer layer and a winter layer. So now developers can toggle between those layers to see the capacity on a feeder based on that season. With the thought being that electrification building heating loads will be used primarily in the winter. So what is the winter system loading to date, and is there capacity already available? The solar PV map, I will note that the data we show on that map is based on circuit loading between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. when solar radiance is at its highest. And for energy storage, we consider a 24-hour load cycle because energy storage can charge or discharge at any time. The energy storage map does have 2 different layers. One is the charging layer, which gives developers the capacity at their node to charge from a load perspective, and then a discharge layer. What is the capacity at that node to discharge the battery? All of these maps are updated on an annual basis. And what I mean by that is that every year we run full circuit model load flow and then hosting capacity analysis on top of those circuit model load flows. So every year when we rerun those analyses, we take into account the previous year's loading, all of the DG that's interconnected, as well as any topography changes that may have occurred or changed over the last year. All of these maps do have a provision to be updated on a biannual or 6-month basis if there are any large material changes to that circuit, such as the interconnection of a large 500 kW or greater site. My next slide here shows what a pop-up window on the solar PV hosting capacity map looks like. So again, I mentioned that if a developer has an address for their site, they can enter the address into the map, zoom in on that location, click on the node or the line segment at that point, and this pop-up window will appear. So in this pop-up window, we give the substation, the feeder ID, the section ID of that line segment, the voltage of the system, of the Central Hudson system, so you can see it's 13.2 kV. And this top field here, the section hosting capacity in megawatts, 3.2 megawatts. This is the hosting capacity at that node. And what we do here in New York, the other utilities are consistent in this approach, is that section hosting capacity is the most limiting criteria of the 4 that are listed in the bubble here to your right. So our 4 criteria that we look at when we perform hosting capacity is impacts of primary overvoltage, primary voltage deviation, regulator deviation, and thermal impacts from generation. So you can see in the pop-up window that 3 of the 4 criteria have an available hosting capacity of 6 megawatts, but regulator deviation or impacts to tap movement limits the section hosting capacity at that node to 3.2 megawatts. Below the section hosting capacity, we have a couple fields circled in green. These are updated on a monthly basis with data from our SIR inventory report. So every month we update these fields that show how much DG is connected on the circuit, how much is in queue, when that queue data was refreshed, and how much DG has been installed on the circuit since the last major refresh analysis was completed. And to your right here is a sample of what a legend for the hosting capacity map looks like. We break the coloring down by these different values in hosting capacity. And the last topic that I wanted to speak to today was the Central Hudson System Data Portal. I will preface by saying that the System Data Portal is a requirement that comes from Central Hudson and the other utilities to publish Distribution System Implementation Plans, DSIP. So approximately every 2 years, each utility is publishing their DSIP. And in preparation of the DSIP, utilities review historical loading on their system at the substation and feeder level and perform forecasting at the substation level. So these the load data that feeds into that DSIP document is then compiled and every 2 years refreshed on the system data portal here, which is publicly accessible. So a developer can leverage this by identifying a specific circuit or feeder ID and then selecting the data for that feeder, and the system data portal will make it available to them. Here on the next slide, I provide some detail into what that load data looks like. So we have within the system data portal 8760 hourly data, historical load data for approximately 275 of our distribution circuits. And we provide forecasted data for those as well. And again, this is another one of our interactive public-facing maps. We at Central Hudson, when we perform the forecasting for the data that we post, we leverage a weather normalized and Monte Carlo based forecast for those transmission and substation nodes. So that does cover the bulk of my presentation. Something I recognize I failed to cover, and I will go back a few slides just to talk to it, is the IOAP. So each utility in New York has an IOAP, an Interconnection Online Application Portal. And this portal is how developers and customers can submit applications to interconnect onto our system. That portal is also the utility's central repository or database for all interconnection information. So Central Hudson uses our IOAP to not only receive and process applications, but then also store all information related to those interconnected and in-queue projects. The IOAP is important to developers and customers because it gives them a one-stop shop to open an application, upload all their drawings, submit any questions or inquiries to Central Hudson, and then actively check to see the status of their project throughout the different phases of interconnection. The IOAP is also where all payments can be made for upgrades. Central Hudson has leveraged the IOAP with different APIs to connect to other systems in our company. And what I mean by that is our interconnection portal, IOAP, is connected to GIS. So when a project is deemed interconnected in our IOAP, that information is translated to our GIS system. So now in our mapping GIS at the utility, we can see that a new project has interconnected onto our grid. Our IOAP is also integrated with Central Hudson's customer information system. So when someone in the engineering team is reviewing an interconnection application, they can automatically verify that the customer is in fact, a customer with Central Hudson. We can pull the account information automatically, the meter information automatically, and ensure that we have an accurate record across the enterprise when it comes to accepting and processing those interconnection applications. So when utilities publish these SIR monthly inventory reports on a monthly basis, we are pulling the latest and greatest information from those IOAP data sets and making the information public. I think that was the last thing I wanted to make sure I covered before wrapping up my presentation for any clarifying questions.
Great, thanks, Adam. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to just ask one that I think is a good clarifying question. It wouldn't take long to answer. Do microgrids follow a specific interconnection rule?
That's a
And
great
yes,
question. Yeah,
complex.
it is. And what I'll say in regard to microgrids is that we don't have much experience on the Central Hudson system with microgrids. When developers propose a microgrid configuration or system that's going to allow them to operate in parallel with the utility or operate in an islanded mode, it does require another level of engineering analysis, testing, and utility grade protection at that point of interconnection. So we do have a couple that have gone through the SIR process. It's still the existing process, but that's a case where we'll often require some of those additional testing periods or review periods to make sure that the microgrid will have no adverse impacts to the distribution system. It's a good question.
Great. Well, we'll hold other questions for the end of all of the presentations, and folks can keep entering them in the Q&A box. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Adam. This is really interesting, informative. I'm going to now turn to Cody. Cody, if you want to get your slides queued up. Cody Matthews is our next presenter. Cody's the manager of Interconnection DR at the Michigan Public Service Commission. Over to you, Cody.
Sorry, the mute button was a little elusive there for a second. Hey, everybody, I'm Cody Matthews. I work at the Michigan Public Service Commission in the Interconnection and Distributed Energy Resources section. My plan today was to go over the Michigan process for updating our interconnection rules and try and highlight some of the things we did to increase transparency. So Michigan has a distribution level interconnection standard applying to investor-owned utilities and member-regulated cooperatives. Municipal utilities are exempt from these rules. Historically, Michigan investor-owned utilities owned some transmission infrastructure. However, following restructuring in the early 2000s, transmission ownership was transferred to independent entities and oversight was shifted to FERC. So with that, transmission level interconnections are handled by the FERC rules and done through MISO and PJM. In April of 2023, Michigan implemented some pretty big updates to its interconnection rules, and those were to align our rules with IEEE 1547 standards and introduced a couple of key provisions. Some of those provisions were the FERC SGIP fast track process, the pre-application report options, public interconnection list requirements, power limiting and inadvertent export rules, and we also added a larger section on annual reporting requirements. We really saw these updates as a way to enhance the efficiency and transparency of our interconnection rules and really enhance connecting DERs to the grid. The update to our interconnection rules began in late 2018 and took the full 5 years to get it to completion in 2023. The process was led by the commission staff, and we coordinated updating the rules using stakeholder engagement meetings, both in large groups and individual meetings with utilities and interested parties. Our plan was a complete rewrite, but in order to speed things up and not reinvent the wheel, we started with Minnesota's interconnection rules as a foundation. Over the course of our update process, we had 11 structured work group meetings and multiple public comment periods, each resulting in a new draft of the interconnection rules. The point of all these meetings was to ensure broad input and transparency. We really find that these processes run much smoother when done in partnership with the utilities and interested parties. So taking and incorporating that feedback was extremely important to us. The final framework establishes statewide rules, but also allows for utility-specific implementation. Each utility is required to develop commission-approved interconnection procedures that outline how they will apply the rules in practice. Because our rulemaking process doesn't allow for any flexibility in the language, and the process to update, if things go smoothly, is 1 to 2 years. To maintain some flexibility on some of the more technical details, we left those out and allowed for a different document to handle those so it could be updated more readily. This allows the rules to apply broadly to both our very large and much smaller utilities without being overly burdensome on either of them. So we thought that struck a good balance between transparency and consistency. So now I'd like to walk through some of the portions of the interconnection rules that really focused on enhancing transparency. The 2023 rules introduced several big changes for our transparency. Some of those include the pre-application report option, a public interconnection list, annual utility interconnection reports, and clearer guidelines around study costs. We saw these updates as a significant step forward in making the interconnection process more predictable and transparent while still ensuring grid reliability and security. I'll go through those in a little more detail, but I did want to point out that as described in the I2X distribution interconnection roadmap, there were and still are some concerns about what data should be shared and how accessible it should be to the public. So those are conversations we're still having, and I think it's really important to highlight. So I'll talk about those a little bit as well. First, looking at the pre-application report, this report is required for larger systems, so projects larger than 550 kilowatts, and it's optional for other projects. The pre-application report has a $300 fee, and to prevent overwhelming the utility review process, applicants and their affiliates are limited to 10 requests per week. This came up in our process because there was some concern that the utilities would just get bombarded with applications, and it would really clog up the review process and cause more issues than it was solving. Kind of along those same lines, our utilities are only required to provide existing and readily available information to keep the process moving forward and efficient. The structure and content of the pre-application report are based on the FERC Small Generator Interconnection Procedures, or SGIP, and some of the details in the report include total capacity, existing generation and any generation currently in the queue, peak and minimum load data. This again was another area where some of our utilities didn't have complete minimum and peak load data. So this falls into the category of if you have it, provide it, and limited conductor ratings. The goal of this was to help applicants make more informed decisions before submitting a formal interconnection request, saving time and resources for both developers and the utilities. Prior to the pre-applications, there were some issues with developers taking more of a shotgun approach because information about the distribution system was just hard to come by. And so you kind of needed to take that approach to find a good location. During the development of the rules, utilities and interested parties raised several concerns about the pre-application report requirements. Some of those concerns dealt with security and confidentiality and compensation. Some of the key points I'd like to point out would be that the belief that the certain system information is proprietary and has a market value, and that the $300 fee isn't adequate or just compensation. Concerns that some project developers operating in Michigan have non-US parent companies, so that brought up foreign access to sensitive information, and that some of the information in the pre-application report could be protected by NERC CEII, which is subject to more strict handling and disclosure requirements. These are concerns we are still discussing and working through to try and balance that transparency and system security. We did discuss during those meetings that some states provide more detailed information, and that information is readily available. But we saw that one of the issues with that was that making that level of detail readily and easily accessible to anybody was a concern. That said, since the rules have been approved, we haven't run into any major issues with the pre-application report. So to that degree, we see the framework as functioning as intended. The next is the public interconnection list. And as a part of that rule, we followed very similar to Minnesota's interconnection process. Under our version, the utilities that receive 100 or more completed interconnection applications per year are required to comply. This ensures the rules target utilities with a higher volume of DER activity, where transparency can have its greatest impact, because some of our smaller utilities don't get as many of those applications. It put a bigger burden on them as far as costs go to try and implement a public interconnection list. So for the utilities that it does apply, the public interconnection list must be maintained and posted on the website. And this is intended to improve transparency and help identify potential system constraints. Some of the concerns that were raised during the rules development process is that the information in this list provided too much detail about the distribution system. However, it's similar to the last rule. The final version of the rules included that, and we haven't run into any major issues. We're still working with a few utilities to get this information provided and updated on a regular basis. And one of the things we wish we would have done in the rulemaking process is require that the sortable spreadsheet be available online for download. Instead, some of our utilities require the interested person to email them and request the spreadsheet. For study costs, this was another huge improvement for us. The previous iteration of the interconnection rules did not clearly lay out costs for studies. This led to some confusion among developers about how much interconnection might cost, and often resulted in a pretty huge surprise when study costs were received. Under the 2023 rules, utilities may charge upfront application fees and study fees to recover the costs of reviewing and studying projects. These fees are capped to provide some cost predictability, but the utilities may charge actual costs up to these caps, and any costs exceeding those caps would require a waiver from the commission. We have had utilities request waivers from these fee caps because certain studies that they would like to do can be more complex or resource intensive. The waivers have generally been approved for a 1 to 2 year period and require that the utility request another waiver with more information after they expire. It's important, I think, for me to note that some of our utilities perform studies in-house while others lack that capability. So that's where some of that cost disparity can come from. In reviewing each utility's interconnection procedures, these costs were identified to staff, and we're planning to continue to meet with these utilities to try and better understand where these costs are higher and if things can be done to bring them back down. The interconnection reporting was another one. Currently, the commission receives annual reports related to only its distributed generation program, which is our largest area for interconnection with about 24,000 projects currently. Some of the data we collect includes generation type, size, information about any storage connected to the project, and very high level location, just county level. In 2023, the rules introduced new utility reporting requirements that apply to all interconnection projects rather than just DG. It broadened the scope for us. The rules do not lay out what information needs to be reported and gives staff some leeway on what information, similar to the procedures document. The commission established a interconnection technical work group tasked with developing the reporting format and ensuring it meets the needs for the commission, utilities, and stakeholders. Some of the areas we're planning to look at for reporting include timelines, cost, and commonly occurring reasons for project denials. The hope for these annual reports is to not only inform the commission about these projects, but to make the annual report useful for the utilities and developers. The work group is open to all interested parties, and we're hoping to get feedback about the proposed reporting metrics to help develop a cohesive set of reporting requirements. So that was a lot about our interconnection rules, and I wanted to touch on hosting capacity as well, because this is another area we've made some pretty good strides in. So Michigan's intro into hosting capacity maps began as a part of a broader effort to enhance grid transparency and facilitate the integration of DERs. In 2016, a new energy law was passed that required IRPs, distribution plans, and some customer-facing programs. And so those were pretty big changes for us. In 2020, as a part of another new energy law, the commission directed some of the utilities to include hosting capacity analysis in their 5-year distribution plans. This move aimed to provide clearer insights into where the grid could accommodate additional DERs without significant upgrades. In 2022, the commission established the Distribution System Data Access Work Group to further explore and standardize hosting capacity data. The initiative led to the development of more detailed and accessible hosting capacity maps. In June of 2023, the commission released its grid integration report, which talked about the benefits of hosting capacity maps. Additionally, the report recommended improving the current hosting capacity maps in granularity. As a part of that process, the commission staff requested assistance from LBNL to provide technical assistance on the appropriate levels of data granularity for publicly available hosting capacity. In June of 2024, a memo was issued with details about the benefits and challenges with different levels of data granularity. Today, hosting capacity maps are increasingly viewed as a best practice in Michigan's grid planning. While it's not yet mandated statewide, discussions have been continuing with technical work groups about standardizing the expectations and formats to ensure some consistency and relatability across the state. This is an example of one of Michigan's hosting capacity maps. As you can see, the information is still relatively high level. It offers an overview of where distribution DERs may be more easily accommodated. The granularity is limited. These maps are restricted to 3-phase distribution lines and only reflect hosting capacity up to 2 megawatts. Another important point is that the update frequency of these maps is not mandated. So each utility has the flexibility to determine how often they refresh their data. At present, some of the utilities are updating the maps annually, while others have chosen to update more frequently. So while we saw these maps as a meaningful step towards greater transparency, we still think there's room for improvement in terms of coverage, detail, and consistency. The last thing I wanted to cover was utility interconnection automation. All of our larger utilities are utilizing PowerClerk to manage the administrative aspects of interconnection, but have generally not gotten into any automation review yet. We have one utility that has started to dive in, and it's found that the automation of the initial application review has been helpful, but those are limited to smaller projects, less than 25 kilowatts in size, inverter based, and on single phase service only. So while we see or believe that automation could be a huge help in the future, I think there's some concern about over automating and losing some vision into what projects you're approving. And with that, are there any questions?
Hey, Cody, there are a lot of questions. I think we'll move on, given the time. Let's move on to the next presentation, and then we'll batch the questions together.
Okay.
All right, so next up, we have the Illinois Commerce Commission, and we will have presentations by David Rearden, Senior Economist, and Calvin Monson, Analyst. I'll just give me one moment and I will share your slides. All right, can you all see that?
Yep.
All right, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And we're here to talk about interconnection in Illinois. Next slide, please. Yeah, the first thing I want to mention is that both of our major electric utilities, ComEd and Ameren, Illinois, are both they both are they don't have their transmission, generation, and distribution are all separate, so that none of our neither of the utilities have any generation at all, and so that kind of changes the how they're governed. The big change that happened in Illinois was the CEJA, or Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. It was effective in 2021, and it was a rather large bill. It had a lot of parts to it, and the goal was to phase out carbon emissions, and to do that, it put in incentives for distributed energy resources, electric vehicles, and in order to decarbonize. The other aspect of CEJA was that it required both ComEd and Ameren, Illinois, which are the two major utilities in Illinois, to provide make grid plans in which they propose investment and cost recovery. both of those, that change was pretty big for Illinois because previously Emeren and ComEd filed annual rate recovery plans where they would try to recover their costs that they had already incurred. Next slide, please. Again, the CEJA had a lot of different parts to it. Again, decarbonization was a big part of it, but there were also a lot of parts. There were a lot of aspects such as equity and environmental justice. Communities were targeted for making sure that they were part of, received a lot of the benefits of a lot of the benefits of the investment. There are also workforce development plans, and again, the grid plans were a real big part of the whole CEJA thing. Next slide, please. So the grid plan, they have to have a grid plan for every 3 years. And again, the utilities need to provide justification for the spending, and they need to have that approved before they can conduct those projects. And again, the plans are to support the goals of CEJA. The other aspect is hosting capacity transparency. Both of our utilities have hosting capacity maps, and we're trying, and there's a lot of discussion within the state on how to make those work better. Again, because they file the plans, they publicly share that planning data, and that includes load forecasts and hosting capacity maps. What's I going to say? Next slide, please. Again, the plans are to being filed every 3 years, and in order to achieve the goals of CEJA. One of the categories for the investment, initially when they were filed, the utilities did not want to have a category for increasing hosting capacity. And now, since then, the commission ruled that they have to have projects that are intended to increase hosting capacity. So there's a lot of discussion about how to leverage, or how to plan for increasing hosting capacity in an equitable way. Next slide, please. Okay, so both utilities have hosting capacity maps, and they provide capacity down to the feeder level, and they are both online on their websites so that those are publicly available. And they provide capacity at every location. Next slide, please.
So I'm Calvin Monson. I'll pick up from here. So one of the features of CEJA, our act from 21, was the authorization of an interconnection working group. The commission has formed it to work and discuss interconnection and improve access. It's intended to make recommendations for changing our interconnection rules to improve them. It got off to a slow start, frankly, and with discussions that could be compared with the Paris peace talks in the 70s, deciding the size of the table to meet around. But once we got through particularly a governance practice, which would be if there was a commission, a recommendation to the commission, that losers on that vote could also present their view why that's not a good idea. And with that agreement, we were able to move forward into the substance of interconnection reform. There's various members on this working group. The utilities, of course, are there. The staff is there. Developers, aggregators of the different sizes of projects are represented. Consumer advocates and our attorney general are there, and different environmental and equity groups are represented in the governance of our working group. Next slide, please. So we some of these areas are just listed in the act. The act gave a list of topics, which is pretty inclusive, that we can address in the working group. One thing we've encountered as we've begun discussing with developers and utilities is there's the timelines in our rules are being viewed as suggestions, not rules. There's a backlog of on the queues, and trying to make amends or make changes that would fix that is undergoing right now. Part of it is that we're doing one of our utilities is doing a sequential approach to the cost study. So you do one, and then you do the next one and finish it. Then you do the next one and finish it. And in the different queues, there's more than one queue, of course, so they're doing more than one study, but the improvement we're looking at is how to do these in groups and break the backlog. We have had some success in improving the capacity maps, the hosting capacity maps. They're, as David just said, they're online and available. We've managed to reduce the time between updates on especially some of the distribution queues and hosting maps. Next slide, please. So here's the thing we're viewing as hosting capacity, which is the maximum amount of distributed energy resources, such as rooftop solar, battery storage, or electric vehicle charging that can be added to a specific point on the grid without requiring significant upgrades or compromising grid reliability. It's typically measured in megawatts or kilowatts and varies across the various places where the interconnection can take place. Next slide. A statement from our largest utility, ComEd, is our updated hosting capacity map provides developers every month, so it's a monthly, with near real-time information about solar projects in the development queue, which is key to identifying the best available location to interconnect their project to our grid. That's one of the executives at ComEd. And I'll turn it back now to David. And a new slide, please. Thanks. David, you're on mute.
The difference that with Ameren, Illinois, is that their hosting capacity map, which I think this has come up some places, there's not, they don't charge for it, actually you can go to the next slide, please. The difference with Ameren, Illinois is it has two different hosting capacity maps. One is at the distribution level where voltages are less than 15 kV and are used to evaluate projects less than or up to 5 MVA. Next slide, please. And then they split it up into sub-transmission, which are system voltages from 34.5 to 69 kV. And again, part 466 goes up to 10 MVA, and so that map covers 10 MVA to 5 MVA. And again, those are in order to determine interconnections that will not require further investment. Next slide, please.
So one of the parts of our grid plans from last year, we took 2023 to review the first grid plans. The next round is anticipated to begin with January filings in 2026. But in that first grid plan in 23, ComEd had proposed a very large communications network investment to connect all the different possible points of trouble, I guess you could call it, or possible points of trouble in their network with a fiber optic connection. It was very expensive. It was objected to by in the proceeding, and they cut back and put back or tried to put the network more on wireless than on fiber optics to save costs. This big communications network is intended to support DERMS, real-time grid monitoring, and dynamic system flexibility. It's advertised to form the backbone for future dynamic hosting capacity. And like I said, the investment plans were scaled back in the grid plan. The idea was that they could monitor with the higher, especially with the higher bandwidth of the fiber optic network, they would be able to monitor with a lot of detail different parts of the grid and therefore use or not use different developers' interconnected facilities, among other things like finding and preventing downtime. David? Oh no, I'm doing the next one, sorry. let's go to the next one, please. Ameren, Illinois, in its grid plan, proposed a entirely wireless network using LTE technology. It has entered into a contract to buy wireless licenses. These are the frequencies used by the old Nextel wireless, the phone company Nextel. These frequencies are in the area where Ameren operates or are under contract to Ameren. They had need for a lot of updating of their communications capabilities. Some of those systems needed or couldn't obtain spare parts or replacements in any way. So they're obsolete, and the LTE wireless networks enabled high speed and some of the same benefits that ComEd was proposing to have in its network. Because of concerns about the overall size of the grid plants, there was similar resistance to the investments in this data network. And what they ended up proposing to do in this grid plan is simply to make their payments that they're already contracted to do for the spectrum licenses and to postpone the towers and so forth backhaul for the next grid plan. I think that does it for us. I'll go to the final slide. David, you want to say something about this one? You're on mute still.
Just
There
to
you go.
note that in the hosting capacity map for Illinois, for Ameren, Illinois, the distribution capacity map is updated monthly, and the subtransmission map is updated annually unless there's a big DER growth of 10 megawatts or greater. Then they'll investigate updating the map, and then obviously ComEd is updated monthly. So just wanted to point that out.
And that does it for us.
All right, thank you so much for this really interesting presentation. I am going to now open it up for a panel discussion. So if we could have all of the panelists turn on their videos. And the way we're planning to do this to first take a couple of prepared questions, and we will then also take Q&A from the audience. And so as a reminder, if you have other questions for the panelists at any time, feel free to put those in the Q&A box and make a comment there, and we will take your questions as they come in and direct them. So to start off, to a question to all panelists, and I'm not seeing Adam yet. There we go. So what are the regulatory requirements for utilities to release DER interconnection data publicly in your state? So all of you shared a lot of detail on the various types of data that you share, and it really varies quite a bit by state and jurisdiction. And so if you could share a little bit more about what sort of data is shared about interconnection services versus grid data, such as hosting capacity that is shared for the benefit of developers trying to find the appropriate point of interconnection.
Mhm.
So I might tap Adam first to
Sure.
take a stab at that question.
Yep. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, so what I'll say from a utility perspective in New York is that the process has been iterative. We have been developing these reports and data, public data sharing information platforms for several years now. Similar to some of the other states and jurisdictions, New York does have several working groups between the state, the utilities, and the developers. And when I say state, I'm referring to our Public Service Commission, the New York State regulator. So we have a working group for interconnection technical requirements. We have a working group for interconnection policy requirements. We have a working group for for integrated planning. That final one is what handles hosting capacity. The policy working group is what handles revisions to the SIR, that standardized interconnection requirement document. And then the technical working group is what handles topics related to, technical screens and the technical analysis behind interconnecting these projects. So I'd say each of those working groups informs the different platforms with which we publicly post the data. So the policy group finalizes that list of the different fields we post in the SIR monthly report, and then the integrated planning group, with feedback from the state and stakeholders, decides what to post for the hosting capacity maps. Lastly, New York State has an initiative to compile all of the hosting capacity data from all the utilities onto one platform, the IEDR. So it's critical that all of the utilities in New York have identical fields and data points on our hosting capacity maps so that the data can compile successfully at a state level.
Thank you. That's really helpful and interesting, particularly in the role that these working groups play in identifying what data fields are going to be standardized and shared. So turning to Cody, and also to David and Calvin, I wanted to kind of look also in your jurisdictions at the difference between the data that you share or that is required to be shared from utilities on interconnection services, such as timelines, queue volumes, versus grid data, such as hosting capacity. And then just a follow-up question is, do you see, outside of investor-owned utilities, do you see munis and co-ops in your state following the same reporting requirements?
Yeah, I can touch on this a bit. For Michigan, the only requirements that we have in place are that they do annual reports. I think from a staff standpoint, we're pretty lucky that there's a lot of flexibility in what that data is. And I think that may be a little frightening for some utilities, given that there's no outline of what that data is. Staff has always found it extremely beneficial to work closely with the utilities. Obviously, they hold the data. There's a ton of uses for that data, and we see a ton of value in that data. But we've always worked super closely with the utilities on what data is important to us and what data do they feel comfortable sharing. So I think that's the process we're going to continue to take for our current rules, and that we're planning to work with the utilities on what is reasonable to ask for and what is kind of outside that bounds of reasonable information.
That's great. Thank you for that answer. David or Calvin, do you want to respond?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, we do not have any jurisdiction over the co-ops or munis. So we don't have any insight into how they're approaching interconnection at all.
We're not aware of them doing anything.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And in terms of information in the that they need to provide, Part 466 requires an annual report that has the applications by tier. We have 4 tiers. Tier 1 is less than 25 kV. Tier 2 is up to 5 megawatts, and tier 3 is for non-exporting, and tier 4 is up to 10 megawatts. but so they have to provide applications and capacities for each of those tiers, and also have to provide the fuel type for how much fuels, how much solar, how much wind, and so forth that are applied for.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And that
Just one other thing is in the queues, there is some information about activity for an interconnection, and that is a source of a little bit of controversy in terms of how much information should be in the queue report.
The queues have different serial numbers, et cetera, for different network pieces, and there's a claim of security and then the queues have a number. The different pieces that are associated with that queue have their own numbers, and so it's very hard for the developers to just even know where they are and all that. They're trying to straighten that out and make that more accessible.
Mhm. So relatedly, and this is another question to all panelists, is how, with the increasing demands for data sharing requirements, how are regulators helping utilities, and how are utilities, in the case of Central Hudson, managing the technical capacity needs to manage the increasing data flows? And what role does automation play in reducing resources needed? I know a few of you have mentioned automation. So if we could kind of go around the horn again to answer that question. Cody, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. So this is probably the prime example of why we are meeting with our utilities so often. We can come up with pages and pages of annual reporting requirements, and without discussing with the utility and trying to understand the capabilities, it's really not all that useful. If we give them 100 reporting requirements and 5 of them are what they can report on, we've got a long list of nothing. So that's one we're addressing in the work groups. We're still drafting our requirements, but we're trying to get as much input as possible. For automation, I think staff sees this as a capability or a way to really ease up some of those review requirements and the early stages of applications. There's only so much you can automate. Obviously, with some of the larger projects, the studies get much more detailed, have a ton more requirements. But on those early on and those smaller projects, I think there's a ton of utility time put into reviewing those. So to the degree that we can automate some of that, I think it would really help free up some of that utility employee time.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Adam, do you want to jump in there from your perspective from the utility side?
Sure. Yeah. So for the question in terms of reporting requirements and how the utility and the regulator interact, I know that's something that's also a product of the working groups where either the regulator or industry, the developer community will request a new field or a new data set from the utility. We take it back and determine if that's something that we can share publicly, confirm that it's not customer information, confirm that it's not related to any security requirements on our system. And finally, if it is something that we can report on, we need to recognize whether it's something we're going to report on um, from this date forward, or if it's something we need to grab data, historical data, because in some instances we might not have the historical data because we've never been called upon to report it. One such example I'm thinking of is withdrawn projects. So I think it was about a year and a half ago, the utilities were asked to include withdrawn projects on our SIR monthly inventory report. Some utilities had already actively logged that information, so it wasn't a terrible lift to start including it. Other utilities, may have had more hurdles to get that data out there. So we do work together as the utility community with staff to decide on, okay, if this is a new field, is it something we're going to report on in the next month or the next 6 months? How much, runway do we need to automate and prepare our reports to publish that, and then decide, whether it's going to be just moving forward or historical data as well. So it is a collaborative effort, and to Cody's point, we have to recognize whether we have that data or if it's just going to be blank fields. And then in terms of automation, we do try to automate as much as we can. I think with our portal, our database, the automations and integrations with our GIS system and customer information system significantly help us in terms of processing the applications and automating that application review process. But when it comes to some of the hosting capacity, the interconnection studies, even reviewing historical load data, there is still an element that requires engineering and technical review to make sure that the data we're publishing is accurate and makes sense. I don't think we'll ever be able to fully automate all those steps or even publishing the data without having, someone check and put eyes on it.
That makes a lot of sense. Calvin, David, do you want to comment on this? And, feel free to also bring in some of the challenges with data sharing. I know you touched on that in your presentation related to security or privacy concerns.
Yeah, we have the same issues that utilities have to be careful about the data that they provide publicly. There was, I think one of the presentations talked about the CEII data, and that can be a concern. There have been discussions around automation as, hey, maybe that would be a great thing. But as far as I know, the only automation is the use of Power Clerk to keep track of interconnections, and both Ameren and ComEd use that, and so that's a good place to have data, but it's not really automating interconnection. And I would probably second what Adam said about never, it's never going to be fully automated, I think, in terms of developing that.
We had a small advance on this a couple of months ago in our working group, and that was Commonwealth Edison offered, sounds like a junior high locker conversation, but Commonwealth offered to take a request from one queue participant and share that contact information with another queue participant if they also agreed to share back the other way. And so it sounds like a small thing, but they don't know each other. They don't know each other.
Yeah. As a way to lower interconnection costs and have a joint interconnection.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I saw you go off mute, Cody. I don't know if you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I just had one more thing about automation, and it's kind of automation in general. As many benefits as I think there are to automation and really freeing up utility time, there's always the concern of over automating and losing vision into what you're automating. So I think that's a line we need to watch.
Okay, thank you for that. And Lisa, if you want to start, jump in on any of the Q&A.
Yeah, we have a lot of really good questions, so let's see how fast we can answer as many of them as possible. So I have two related questions. First, for Adam, are there any use cases of flexible interconnection projects like solar with export limitations or large EV charging stations where the utility doesn't have enough capacity 24/7? but still is able to do the interconnection while imposing some demand limit rules?
It's a great question and something that is top of mind and discussion in New York State. So we have been speaking about flexible interconnections in the technical working groups as well as the policy working groups for probably close to 2 years at least. And I spoke on this at a Distributech conference in March, and it's a very interesting topic because um, personally, I think the technology is there to make flexible interconnections happen. And what I mean by that is Central Hudson, as well as most, if not all, the other utilities in New York, have completed some level of a pilot for flexible interconnections. So I know at National Grid and at NYSEG, they have projects that have interconnected flexibly. At Central Hudson, it was an R&D project on a fixed site that we proved we could control flexibly for a number of months, and just illustrated that the concept is able to be executed in the field. And what I see as next steps now is determining the policy around flexible interconnections. Do you have two separate queues for for flexible versus static interconnections? So now, are you separating it into a static firm queue and then a dynamic flexible queue? Um, are you holding those projects flexible for the entire interconnection life? Or if, system upgrades are made 5 years down the road, do they now connect firm? Do utilities have to maintain a specific curtailment limit? If I interconnect you with flexible interconnection, do I have to limit, annual curtailment to 5%, 8%, 10%? I think there's, still several different um, items that need to be discussed and finalized before we can make it a business as usual upgrade or interconnection option. We still want to decide, is it going to be, pro rata or last in, first out? So within flexible project, are all projects curtailed evenly, or does the last one curtail first because they are the most they are contributing to the violation the most on the system. So um, I think because each utility has proven it can work, we know the technology is there, but we still have a lot to do on the policy side, as well as defining what flexible means. Is it going to be just for energy storage and solar PV in terms of generation, or will we also be flexibly controlling EV charging and other aspects of the grid?
Okay, I'm
So
gonna ask a
yeah.
that was a great answer. I mean, it might not be satisfactory for everyone, but I thought it was like good for all the nuances. Let me ask a lowbrow version of this. This is a separate
Yeah.
question that came in. And I want to ask this of everyone, but quick responses if we can. Are any of your organizations considering some kind of program, or maybe you already have it, or requirement for interconnection customers or developers to participate in, well, I guess customers, in a demand reduction management program for quicker interconnection? This is like the, several decades old lowbrow version.
Yeah, we don't have that today.
We don't
Anybody
have
else?
that in Michigan either. It's certainly come up, but nothing that we've implemented at that time.
Okay, Illinois?
No.
All right, that
Uh,
was quick.
no, it has been, I've heard discussions of where DR and flexible interconnection are not totally separate, but no, there's no
Okay.
requirement.
All right, I'm gonna ask one more question and then turn it back to Catherine. So this is on a different topic. And some of you sort of touched on this, but I don't think fully answered. Adam, you mentioned withdrawn projects, for example. So how would all of your organizations considered so-called shelved, well, this person used the term shelved capacity on your hosting capacity maps. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'm gonna interpret it as, projects that didn't happen. And so I don't know how you view this question, but respond how you can.
I can say that when we perform hosting capacity analysis for those maps in our engineering analysis of that circuit, we only account for interconnected projects. However, when we perform an interconnection study for a specific project, we do consider all interconnected and projects ahead in queue. Once a project is withdrawn, it's no longer accounted for in either study.
Great, thans.
In
Yeah,
Illinois, oh, go ahead, David.
Illinois is the same. We uh, every if you're up first in the queue, you have the one study and withdrawn. Projects are supposed to be withdrawn if they don't take action after a certain period of time. So they're not part of the equation anymore. And that's actually could be kind of controversial sometimes because it's not clear when projects should be pulled out of the queue and when they shouldn't be.
One example of that is recently in our interconnection working group, we went through an exercise to identify projects where the developer did not have site control or didn't have a very rigorous version of site control. And they were, some of those were pulled off of the queue, their queues.
Great, thanks. Catherine?
All right, so this is a question to both commissions. How have you navigated challenges with developing rules for interconnection sharing, which is broadly framed, but what advice would you give to other states that aren't as far along, that are looking at ways to improve data sharing and transparency?
I can go first on this one. I know I've been harping on it, but transparency and working with the utilities as early as possible. I guess both the utilities and the interested parties as early as possible. When we started our rulemaking process, it was not our intention for it to take 5 years, but the amount of discussions we felt like we needed to have required the full 5 years. We weren't comfortable moving forward with certain things until we understood better both sides of the aisle, I guess, so to speak. But so that would be the biggest one for me, is meeting and working with both parties. Don't wait until you're in that rulemaking phase before meeting. Build that trust early and try and have that relationship going. We've done this with both cybersecurity and now interconnection, and that has worked well for us.
It's great advice. Thanks for sharing that. David or Calvin, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just as a little bit of background, in Illinois, our rulemaking process is a fairly rigid one. So when we have a year to do a rulemaking, and once that rule is in place, it's we can have a waiver, but it is very rigid. So once it's in place, it needs to have everything in it that you need. So before proceeding, so that's something that we've had to work around. And I think Cody's advice is very good. We did have a lot of workshops before we did a rule, but we don't have 5 years to do it. We have to do it within a year.
And receive legislative approval.
Yeah, that's part of the rigidness.
Yeah. All right, thanks for those answers and advice. One question to Adam, what are the technology solutions that protect customer data, customer privacy and security, that enable Central Hudson to share data at a granular level on a public-facing website? So I know this has come up as a concern of utilities and regulators in other states on how to navigate these concerns. So if you could share a little bit from your perspective, having done this for a number of years.
And how I'll answer that is just to say that we, as the utility, we do require human intervention before posting anything. So, in the instance of that SIR monthly inventory report, when we publish that report internally, the PSC, the state regulator, does require 2 copies of that report. One copy is redacted of customer information that will be posted publicly, and one does have the customer information that the that the regulator requests. So when we file, and that's a manual task that somebody has to execute, they review those 2 documents to ensure that the 2 copies are with the fields that contain customer information or do not, and are sent to the regulator accordingly. And then the same goes for the hosting capacity maps. All of the fields are manually reviewed before being published, and we ensure that the processes we establish only utilize fields that are approved to be published publicly.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Lisa, do you want to jump in with some of the Q&A again?
Yeah, let's see if we can answer more of the questions from the audience. So the DER interconnection roadmap that we're all gathered around today sets targets for the year 2030 that include approval timelines of a business day for systems that are less than 50 kW and approval rates of 85% or more. So those targets rely heavily on the assumption that the hosting capacity maps will be comprehensive and frequently updated to inform the applications and to enable the utility to approve those applications quickly. What obstacles do you see for getting the hosting capacity maps to that level of functionality? And let's start with Adam.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll focus on the less than 50 kW interconnection size. And one of the biggest obstacles or not biggest obstacles, but when it comes to the technical requirements to interconnect one of those projects, it depends on the size of the transformer feeding that interconnection point. And while 90% of our records are satisfactory in terms of the size of the transformer feeding a specific location, for that missing 10%, it may require some additional business days to coordinate with a local district operating unit or to take a field trip to confirm the size of a transformer so that we don't interconnect a distributed generator that's oversized compared to the transformer. So for me, it comes down to data clarity, accuracy, and robustness on the utility side. And then I do want to mention that in New York State, as of January 2023, we have required smart inverter settings for all new applications. So now when a residential project applies, there is a smart inverter setting profile that is specific to Central Hudson for less than 50 kW projects. What we've noticed is that many developers struggle to achieve these specific settings on the first go around. So it would be difficult to automatically approve interconnection in a timely manner if we can't trust that the settings we require are being applied to these DGs.
Calvin or Dave, Cody, any other follow-up you want to add?
Yeah, I think Adam made a great point about the settings. That is, I don't want to say a tough one, but getting developers and installers to get the information correct on applications isn't always something you have control over. So I think that's a big one. I think as far as obstacles to getting the hosting capacity maps to that level of functionality, I think with enough money, any of the utilities could probably do it, but it comes down to who is paying for that and where the value in those maps is. So yes, those maps have a ton of value to developers and installers and utilities. Your standard residential customer isn't going to benefit a whole lot from these maps. So trying to balance the value to customers and developers alike has been an interesting one.
Right. I'll squeeze in one more question on another topic. A big one. How is FERC Order 2222 impacting all this? Like, for example, is it being incorporated in some way? Does it affect hosting capacity maps? since distributed resources, will participate in the wholesale market. Anybody thought of that?
I can mention that
Go
at,
ahead.
at
Go
Central
ahead.
Hudson, yeah, for FERC 2222, we have been talking about how we're going to comply with this order from mostly from a technical standpoint, and in that will we have to complete new technical analysis of the aggregated projects when they enroll in 2020 and 2222, or will we be able to rely on some of the analysis we did to allow for the initial interconnection, since that was under worst case conditions? We we haven't seen any aggregators register in our service territory, and I'd say it's still something that we're preparing for. And we'll see how the next 6 months go in terms of this year as we work towards that.
Cody or Calvin or David?
Yeah, so for Michigan, we allow aggregation currently, but only for projects larger than a megawatt in total aggregation. So very large customers. The thought behind that is that they would have energy managers on site and be a little more adept in the energy field. The biggest issue, I think, for overcoming that is communication. It's been tough to try and get good communication between developers, utilities, the commissions, MISO. There's a lot of communication and a lot of data that needs to be shared, and getting that done efficiently, as I think, will be tough.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen much activity along those lines in Illinois. We are currently trying to develop a virtual power plant program in Illinois. We'll have tariffs, I think, by the end of the year, maybe, or early next year. But we don't have much activity there.
Right, great. Catherine, I'll go back to you, and then as folks can multitask, maybe you can answer some of the questions in the Q&A box. Thanks.
All right, so this is, we've talked a lot about what data you do share, but is there any category of data that you do not share, and why? Have there been kind of decisions made that you've decided to forego sharing particular categories of data, for example, interconnection upgrade cost estimates publicly?
Yeah, so currently we've got quite a few categories of information that aren't shared. Technical data such as interconnection upgrade cost estimates, specific location level data are not shared publicly. The primary reason for this limitation has been security and confidentiality, particularly grid infrastructure and sensitive system vulnerabilities that could be exposed. We do recognize that this information is valuable to developers and other stakeholders for planning and cost estimation, though. So as a part of our new rulemaking, we're trying to work and get more of that data accessible.
Okay, thank you. David, Calvin, do you?
Yeah, the security data there's a lot of concern about that. Also data that is proprietary. Again, Calvin mentioned that there's a ComEd has begun allowing projects to sort of collaborate if they wanted to get together to share costs. But other than that, not a lot there.
Okay, thank you.
There's requests from developers to share cost information about I apply to have an interconnection, and a study is done, and others are asking, can I see that cost study? And I'd maybe like to have that be my cost study. And am I in a similar situation with the other developer who has a very similar solar farm? one cornfield over. We're not getting that yet. There's requests though.
Okay, that's interesting. So kind of a push towards that. And I suppose we have on the other side, Adam, you have a perspective on where that data, some fields of data are being shared for New York, that maybe not be in other jurisdictions. Do you want to comment on that, or on any fields of data that you do not share at this time, but are maybe working towards, or have decided not to forego?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I know in terms of I can kind of echo what Calvin just mentioned, where we've had developers, request the report or impact study from a nearby developer that completed a study, recently within the last year or so, and we cannot share the reports and those details publicly or with anyone. But I do think we do share a significant amount of information in New York, and some developers are able to use that information to make some of their own decisions and understandings based on what's made public. But as far as fields we don't share, nothing jumps to mind. I know we've spent many years, slowly posting more and more. So I think we've gotten to a bit of a point where we have most of what's been asked of us and made it public.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then we'll take a few more from the Q&A. So we've talked quite a bit about hosting capacity maps, or you all have touched on it one way or another, but I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about how hosting capacity maps help reduce uncertainty about interconnection locations in your state. What feedback have you received so far about the benefits of hosting capacity analysis?
That's a good question. I know for Central Hudson and in New York, we have users of the hosting capacity map from beginner to intermediate to expert, where I'd say, still maybe on a monthly basis, we receive an inquiry to our distributed generation email or phone hotline asking, just some of the hosting capacity basics. And we're happy to schedule a call and walk individuals through how to use it, the 101 of the maps. But then we also have users that leverage the REST API URLs that the New York Joint Utilities make available for our maps, where they're able to pull those maps locally and use it for their own analysis off of rather than using the web-based interface we provide. The New York Integrated Planning Working Group that's responsible for the hosting capacity maps. We sent out a survey last year to stakeholders, and they responded and stated that they would like the utilities to hold a training webinar. So in the fall, in a few months, we are going to hold a publicly available webinar for both an intermediate level and advanced level of usage for those hosting capacity maps.
Good idea. Cody, Calvin, or David, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so we still have pretty high level maps. We've gotten some great feedback that they're very helpful for seeing areas where you can absolutely not do DERs. But because the maps are currently 3-phase and only up to 2 megawatts, it doesn't give a whole lot of data. So we call it a go, no-go map still. So you can either go there or you can't. And I think as helpful as they have been, it has really just made everybody want more. So we want more data, we want more granularity. So I think it's a two-sided sword in that it's been super helpful, but everybody just wants a little more.
For sure. Calvin or David?
Yeah, it's hard for me to, since I don't have any operational experience, I know that the customers really appreciate it. It is kind of as Cody mentioned, go, no go. It's kind of a first approximation to where a place looks good. I think one of the complications we have in Illinois is that they are not net of the queue. So when you look at a hosting capacity map, you can say, okay, there's some room there, and then you go look at the queue and you go, oh, maybe not. So that's if you have a big queue, that can be a I don't know, a turnoff. But yeah, it's hard to obviously the customers really appreciate having them, but you have to be careful how you use them.
Mhm. That is also interesting, the divergence between the two utilities and the kind of cadence. I'm sure that's questions are coming up from developers on demands for data. Lisa, do you want to maybe have one last question and then we can wrap up?
Sure. This is a really practical one. What are the most common system upgrades that you're seeing for interconnecting larger distributed energy resources?
I can answer from a utility perspective. In our service territory, it's most commonly a line conductor upgrade. Some of our neighbors to the north and even more rural parts of the state, they see many limitations with substation transformers, which can be even more costly than line conductor upgrades. But in our territory, I'd say it's predominantly line conductor upgrades is the most kind of restrictive and common violation.
Thank you. In Michigan?
I think that lines up pretty well with what I have heard for the requirements of upgrades.
What about in Illinois?
I don't have any information. I'm not an engineer, so
Sure.
we only see things when there's a dispute.
All right. Great. I'm going to just ask a real quick question that's been waiting for a while, just of Adam. Is your system data available publicly online, and does it require an account registration to access it?
No account registration, and yes, it's publicly available. There was some talk of utilities requiring accounts to be able to log in and access this, but it's since then become fully public. And I did provide links at the bottom of each of my slides to those different public portals.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Back to you, Catherine.
And as a reminder, the links to the slides are in the chat. So thank you so much to our panelists. This was a really fascinating discussion. I'll just share a couple of closing slides with you all. And many thanks to our audience for your very interesting questions. So we have a link here again to the DOE Distributed Energy Resource Interconnection Roadmap, which outlines the various solutions advanced to solve challenges around distributed energy resources, distributed interconnection. So feel free to scan that here. There's also a recently published transmission interconnection roadmap, which identifies 4 major goals to solving challenges around the transmission level interconnection queues. Feel free to use this link or the one in the chat to connect to stay informed of our upcoming webinars and other resources. The slides from today and a recording will be posted on our website, but you can use this link to learn more about I2X. Thank you so much to everyone today. Thanks again to our panelists. Pleasure speaking with you all.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks.